think the top is part of the cloth, so that is the reason for which they have not cut the silk plush like so. Even for the best hats, it was not possible because to avoid an ugly stitch on top, which would also perhaps break with all the friction being pulled so tightly across that so squared angle, especially with ugly shapes. Instead, they would cut it as one piece. So this is actually the same cloth and that the same piece of cloth, same from the same cut, the top. But then it meant that they had to sew it prior, so the whole pattern thing was quite complicated. It had to be done by someone who knew mathematics and all. And once they sewed it was basically a hood that they would just pull over the gauze hammer, thing that they had created, which still had the form inserted, and with the heat, it was all meltable. They would apply it, they would wait for it to dry, and once it was dry, or no, before it was fully dry, they would stick the brim. So obviously, the harder they designed the hat, the more sheets of gauze hammer. So this brim, see how it's stiff, that brim? No problem. If I do that there will be a dent. But then, yes, how to fix the inside. This is not actually a bowler hat, but I was just explaining the inside prior to. This is the reason for which once this is broken, if you desire to change it, you cannot replace it with the same material. You could, but it will not hold, it will not adhere to the gauze hammer beneath. The only way it adheres is because that sheet of gauze hammer, before they apply it, I forgot to talk about it, before they apply it to the shape, they have it laid on the table, they lay the silk on top and simply iron it over. There is no shellac involved, but it is so fine and fragile and featherweight that the heat of the iron, because very soon after they apply that gauze hammer to the wooden block, is the word, it helps as it dries to adhere it to that surface. And they do the exact same thing when they construct the top, right? So that is the reason for even on top where it is not worn out, it barely holds, it does not really hold up. But it kind of still floats about, you know. You would have to perhaps have one to understand. But so when it has to be replaced, they cannot iron inside, even if they remove the leather band, which they often do when they, especially if it, for example, had a big dent. The only way to repair that is they would remove the leather band, they could put it back afterwards, or if it was worn like that, they could not put it back, they would put a new one. And they wet the gauze hammer and iron over. They have special very heavy irons that are very small and they are very heavy, so they're at least 10 kilograms. Some of them are up to 20 kilograms to really block it back. So they have to remove that lining. But the lining, they cannot really put it back and iron it over. It would be sort of too complicated. The time to do it, it would float about, and if somebody puts hands to hold it, they will not have the space. It would require to be a huge hat, so it has to be laid flat out. So one could argue and say, well, why don't they not take off, especially when the silk was worn out, what they would often do is actually take off, heat it up again, no need for water, heat it up above the stove, becomes hot, it melts the gauze hammer, becomes consumable again, so they take out the silk plush, might have been damaged, very damaged, put a new silk hood. So one may think, why don't they not detach that? But I reckon by detaching the gauze hammer, especially that these hats were often only one ply of gauze hammer, it would just break it. It's like tearing paper away. It's not the same thing than pulling the fabric away, the cloth away, because they're just tearing the paper away. So it will not be worth it. So what they would do is either leave it like that unprotected, or put a much thicker silk hood that like here. I'm not sure this is silk because they already have rayon by then, it still looks like silk. There's something much thicker that holds the weight by itself. And which is what they do today when they repair antique hats. Often, unfortunately, they put a nylon or polyester one now. this is just to save cost, but they cannot put something like this. Yeah. I'll just explain why. So getting back, you see this. Okay, so right, getting back. So there was Goshammer hats. A lot of things to talk about. Forget the Derbies and all for why. I want to talk about other things that I already talked about, and I gave false information that I have since learned an incredible lot. I may again be giving false information, but it is more unlikely, and there will be true information in what I know. Now, a lot of these things are partly my theories, but I learned so much more about hats and general things that are way more likely to be correct. So, forget these Goshammer hats now. How did they come to be? Why did they even start with the Goshammer thing? Initially, it was practical right for horse riding, because if you applied a lot, you could get something relatively light and very stiff, like the brim here. But for town weight hats, what is the point? Why did they have even so plush? Why not keep the long-haired ones that obviously could not look as shiny? But that is one of the reasons. But so until the 1850s, 60s, and later on colder places like Canada and all, there is something people call beaver hats, and they often, especially Americans, think these, especially when unpolished, like when the first, usually the antique ones are, the polish is gone, and so they do not look like that. I reapplied the polish, I learned how to do it, it's not like that initially. Remember in the video of the hat playlist, it did not look like that. It looked kind of like a very fine beaver, what people call beaver. This is not a beaver hat, first of all. I mean, this is not, but even the ones that actually beaver hats are not beaver hats, they're not made out of beaver. And it is not fair. People call it fair. I already explained that in another video. It is actually wool, felted wool. So since about the Musketeer era, in the 1500s, they had lots of beavers in Europe. And it was popular. Beavers cannot be eaten, so when they killed them, it was only for the fur. They would, but for the wool. They say fur, but what they do is they would kill them, and they would only use the fur of the belly, the undergrowth that cannot be seen. So it has to be skinned, and then peel all the fur, and then they put it through processes. One of them, which was cutting, which will separate the above growth. There's hard, spiky, almost hedgehog type of hair that you think of as a beaver, the dark brown fur, and only have that undergrowth, which is very downy colored and extremely soft. Basically as soft as that silk plush, if not even softer. Kind of as soft as that, but denser at the same time, and more molten, and extremely agreeable and luxurious. And most of the beaver is not covered in that, hence the reason for it was so expensive. Now, they had this process to speed the process, and eventually there were no more beavers in Europe because everybody was killing them and using them for fur. They used the above growth for other things and whatever, and they used the skins for other things. And also because of deforestation. So eventually it was around that time, especially around the 1600s, that they conquered the Americas, especially from the north. And the north was very conquered initially because of the beaver trade. Everybody back in Europe wanted those, at least all the high society and kind of the middle class wanted those beaver fur and beaver pelts also to make fur, because they're made completely differently. What they keep, it is actually fur, they keep the skin. And for the hats, they would normally not keep the skin, except when they made perhaps for very cold mountains, especially for colder countries like Russia, and all when they made sort of either keep head like those skull caps, which are actually made out of fur, like the stereotypical Russian skull cap that are still around to today. So, how to make the process? The best ones that they still had made until about 1810, but by then they were very expensive because the trappers were kind of, the process was so organized and that it was kind of rare to have a trapper still doing that by then. But